Today's episode of the Our Hen House podcast is being sponsored by our partner, A Well-Fed World. A Well-Fed World is a hunger relief and animal protection organization chipping away at two of the world's most immense, unnecessary, and unconscionable forms of suffering. The suffering of people hungry from lack of food, and the suffering of animals used and abused for food. Mending our unjust food system is a critical part of solving the world's most destructive and persistent problems. Fortunately, the plant-based foods that promote health and well-being are the same foods that conserve resources to better feed the world, while reducing greenhouse gas emissions and protecting the environment. A well-fed world provides the means for change by empowering individuals, social justice organizations, and political decision-makers to embrace the benefits of plant-based foods and farming. Learn more at awfw.org.
Our hen house is a squawking house. Our hen house is their hen house. Our hen house, ooh, it's a funky fresh house. Our hen house is your hen house.
Welcome to Our Hen House. This is Mariann Sullivan. I'm so happy you're here for this week's show because I really do think you're going to love it. My guest is one of my favorite people, probably one of your favorite people if you've been listening to Our Hen House for a while, because he's been here a number of times he used to review for Our Hen House, and he's just one of our favorite people, and it's Ari Solomon of Mercy for Animals, and it was just so great to get together with him to catch up and to chat about what is really one of the most important things to ever happen in the fight to protect farmed animals, and that's the undercover investigation. Of course, Mercy for Animals is one of the leaders in doing undercover investigations, but, Ari's on the communications side, and where are we when it comes to undercover work? He's going to answer those questions for us. And in particular, how is Mercy for Animals reaching out to people with the evidence that they gather? Because, it's great to do the undercover investigations, but the real point is to get the evidence out to people. It's just as important that people find out what it is that's going on factory farms. And Ari's going to fill us in on what Mercy for Animals is doing to try to get the word out, and not just to the vegan choir. And also he's going to talk a little bit about where we're headed with undercover investigations. He's going to share all of these insights, and he has many of them. So you're really going to want to hear this interview, because this is a really important piece of what Mercy for Animals and what everybody in the animal protection movement is working for. And then Jasmine will be joined by Brianna Krejchi, who is a senior at the University of Pennsylvania, and she's the co-president of the Penn Vegan Society. And if you're at all curious about what's going on campuses regarding animals and farm animals and veganism, and how much vegan advocates really can accomplish when they set their minds to it, stay tuned to Brianna's interview. I think it will inspire you. And, speaking of what's going on campuses with veganism, it brings up a thought for me. And this is a thought I know I have a lot. It's something that I ponder all the time. It's one of the central themes of my life. So if you've heard me talk about it before, excuse my talking about it again, but it's particularly important at this point in time. Because right now, our country feels so fractured. And the question is, what is it that ties us to other people? What is it that makes us feel we're part of a particular group, or we have something in common with people? And what makes us feel we're more linked to some people than we are to others? And the fact is that I sort of feel I have some kind of psychic or psychological or emotional link to the students in the Penn Vegan Society that I don't have with people who live down the street from me, even though I've never met the students in the Penn Vegan Society. But I feel like for animal rights vegans, so many of the things that tie us to other people who live near us in the normal world, or for people who share our religion, or share our nationality or ethnicity, or sometimes even are in our family. So many of these things that tie people together are in a lot of ways much weaker for us than the fundamental thing that ties all of us together. That somehow, in this horrifically cruel world, we have figured out that animals matter, that they really matter. And perhaps more importantly, because a lot of people seem to think that animals matter, but we have figured out that we have to act like they matter. And most people don't seem to figure out that. So, of course, most of all, the thing we have to do when we figure that out is not eat them. If they matter, why would you eat them anyway? So my real point is that in so many ways, I feel a unity of spirit with 20-something-year-olds on campuses campuses I've never visited, people I've never met, and that I feel with most people of my own age and generation. Obviously you share a lot of shared experiences with people of your own generation, and there is a unity there, but it pales in comparison to the unity I feel based on this shared awareness about animals. And it as I said, it came up for me because of how fractured our country is right now. Our political points of view have become so polarized that a lot of us feel that we have little in common with a lot of other Americans. And it's an unfortunate thing, but I don't think we can deny it. And it seems to be getting stronger and stronger. And perhaps that has something to do with the world becoming more globalized. It really makes me think that maybe the days of the nation state, where the people who we feel most in tune with are the people who share our country, maybe those days may be coming to an end, or at least fading. I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. If the nation states were to die, and if that is indeed what we are witnessing in the world, and these are just death throes, that could end up going a whole lot of different ways. I just don't know. That's well beyond my capacity to analyze. But in this moment of feeling very distanced from a lot of people I would like to feel unity with, I am just so glad that I have my peeps and that they are all over the world. I mean, I've always said, and I may have said it before when you were listening, so if so, excuse me, but I love to say it. If you dropped me with a parachute anywhere in the world, and I had to take up residence wherever I was, I would find some people who get it about animals. We're everywhere, and we are as one in so many ways. Anyway, enough of that. And actually, though, the other thing I wanted to talk about is kind of related to that, because I saw Arrival last night, the new movie with Amy Adams, and I did want to mention one thing about it. I don't actually think this is a spoiler. I'm not going to tell you what happens in the story. But if you don't want to hear anything about a movie, and I totally understand that, you can just stick your fingers in your ears and go la 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 for a couple of minutes. Or of course you could fast forward. That's another option. Anyway, what I wanted to talk about was the canary. For those of you who have seen it, you may agree with me that the canary is just the craziest thing. The movie, of course, is one of these aliens land on Earth kinds of movies. And the aliens obviously have much better technology than we've got since they got here. And all of the humans are running around trying to figure out whether they're going to kill us or enslave us or be nice to us or whatever. And the whole setup is this confrontation, or maybe not a confrontation, just this effort to communicate with this much more powerful species, should I call them a species, and by this less powerful species, i.e. the humans, and all of the desperate efforts of the less powerful species to avoid getting crushed, or just to try to communicate and hope for compassion or something like it from these very frightening creatures. So throughout the movie, getting back to the canary, or at least throughout part of it, there are these repeated trips into the alien spaceship by humans. And each time they go, they bring this tiny little canary in a tiny little cage, really tiny little cage. And the obvious reason is that the canary is like, it's the canary in the coal mine kind of thing. Like miners back in the old days used to carry canaries into the mine. So if there were gas leaks, the canary would die, and then the miners would know that there was a gas leak and they would be able to leave in time, because the canary would die sooner than humans. And one would hope that there would be better ways of detecting noxious gases nowadays. So I don't know why they decided to use this little canary as in the movie. Every time they went in, they carried a canary. And I was expecting the canary to be a big thing, but it kind of isn't. The canary is chirping away, chirping, as everybody else is trying to communicate. And it just seems like an unbelievable metaphor to me. There's a powerful species, there's a vulnerable species, i.e. the canary. The powerful species is the humans. There's exploitation. There's an inability to communicate, just like it's going on with the humans and the aliens. And do the filmmakers mean to make this metaphor? I just don't know. It seems so obvious to me. I'm just kind of perplexed by it. I tried to find an article mentioning this, and I didn't find anything intelligent, which doesn't mean it's not out there. Other people might have written about this, and I just didn't Google long enough. There was this one article in Bustle, which I thought was completely idiotic. It was, I thought it was going to be about how important the canary was, and in some kind of meaning, but it just told the story of what canaries and coal mines were using for. And then it kind of said, so wasn't this great? The canary was there to protect the humans from dying. Oi, missing the point, unless it's the point that only I got. Anyway, it was pretty interesting. I hope I haven't given away too much. I really don't think I have. That's not what the movie's about. And so before we get to our first interview with Ari, as I said, I just want to remind you that Our Hen House has a matching grant right now. And if you have been waiting to make a donation, and these are tax-deductible donations, Our Hen House is a not-for-profit. Now is really the time to get on it. We just can't do this without you. So if you do listen and you enjoy it, and not that I'm advertising for anybody else, but any kind of journalism that you find meaningful in this day and age, it really has to be paid for. There's too much fake news out there, and the real news outlets have to be getting some money. And if you value information and you value what Our Hen House gives you, please go to ourhenhouse.org/donate and throw us some love. And as you know, by love, I mean money. So that would really help us out. And anyway, getting on to our guest. As I mentioned, he's one of my favorite people. And it's just been way too long since he's been on the podcast to catch up with us about all of the stuff that he does, which is amazing. And Ari Solomon is his name, of course, as I mentioned, and he's the vice president of communications at Mercy for Animals, and he manages all their social media. He also acts as a liaison to celebrities, which he'd be great at. He's such a great personality. And he's also a writer, and he's appeared in the Huffington Post, Los Angeles Times, New York Times, The Advocate, and I really want to mention his videos, particularly his video, Shit Vegans Say, because it really has become a viral sensation. It's hilarious. So I probably say this too often, but if you haven't seen it, stop listening to the podcast, go watch it, and then come back and listen to the rest of the podcast, because it will give you a real belly laugh. And Ari will be joining me right after this.
Our Hen House has a family of podcasts. In addition to the Our Hen House podcast, which you're listening to right now, you can also listen to the Animal Law podcast or the Teaching Jasmine How to Cook Vegan podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you like what you hear and what's not to like, please leave us a friendly review on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. It helps us tremendously, because that's how we grow, and that's how we reach more and more people with information on how to change the world for animals. Thanks for listening.
Welcome to Our Hen House, darling Ari.
Oh, I cannot tell you how good it is to be back.
Oh,
hey,
man.
Mariann.
It's been too long.
It has been. Well, life gets in the way, We're all crazy busy.
Well, you're really crazy busy. And as I just said to you before we started recording, now that you're in charge of the world, and in the time that I have known you, you have really taken over MFA, and MFA has taken over the animal protection movement, and it couldn't be in better hands. And I'm so excited that I know you. And now you used to do all sorts of reviews for us, and now you never have the time, but it's so wonderful to have you here to talk to you about what you really do, and that is shape the state of this movement.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm so happy to be back. And I would love to do some reviews. So I know I'm busy, but I'd love to come back and do some reviews. So just let me know.
Well, that would be amazing, because I know our audience really misses you. And one of the reasons it finally made the decision to call you up and talk to you and get your point of view on everything that's going on. The impetus was this movie that MFA recently put out called Andy Goes In. And it just brought up so many issues for me about undercover investigations and about the work of MFA. Let's talk a little bit about the movie, and then let's talk a little bit about undercover investigations, what they mean for your work and where they're going. But this movie, tell us a little bit about it and tell us why you made it.
Sure. So Andy Goes In is a documentary short. It's about 10 minutes long. It was directed by Josh Polin. He is a Los Angeles-based director. And he approached us and asked if he could follow one of our undercover investigators during an investigation. So he actually went to Tennessee and documented our undercover investigator doing an investigation at a place called TNS Farms. This was a chicken factory farm that contracted to Tyson, and then the chicken was sold to McDonald's for Chicken McNuggets, basically. And the film, for me, we release these undercover investigations and we're showing the conditions that farm animals experience, the abuse, the torture for meat, dairy, and eggs. But this showed that, but it also showed another side, which was what the investigators go through personally, the challenges, living on their own in the middle of nowhere sometimes, having that struggle of being an animal activist yet having to work on a factory farm. It was really very effective, I thought. And what was so fantastic is that the film turned out so well that it was accepted into the Toronto International Film Festival, which is one of the biggest film festivals in the world. And it premiered there last month in September. And it was fabulous. I got to go to Toronto with Josh to attend the premiere. There was a Q&A afterwards. The documentary short was part of a program, so there were other shorts that were screened as well at that time. But at the Q&A, it was very obvious how moved people were by the film, because a lot of the questions that people were directing towards the directors that were on stage were about Andy Goes In. So I think for this audience, which I'd say there was about 100 to 200 people in the audience, I think it was the first time they'd ever seen undercover footage from a factory farm.
Well, that's really great. I mean, that is the key, to get people who haven't seen it to see it. But what I thought was really interesting, and it is something that you alluded to, there really wasn't a lot of gruesome. I mean, there was some, but because it's inevitable if you're there. But the film did not focus on gruesome footage, and it was more of a movie about people. I mean, a short film about people than really about the animals. And do you think that's a good way? You are the director of communications, and your life is communication, and you're communicating some of the hardest information to get across to people because they don't want to know it. So is focusing on people a good way to get people to watch?
Absolutely. I think that telling stories is one of the best ways to get people to absorb this information. Lots of times when you're just showing horrific footage of animal abuse, people shut down. They turn it off. They don't want to watch it. It's hard to watch. But when you're telling someone's story, I think it engages you in a different way. So getting to hear the story of this undercover investigator, I think, was extremely powerful. And I loved that we got to see this other side.
I also loved the focus on how suspicious the woman who worked there. I wasn't sure whether she worked there or, I don't think she was one of the owners, but she was very suspicious and brought up the idea that he might be an undercover operator. And, particularly when, horrible things were being done to animals. And I just thought it was fascinating. And also an insight into people rather than focusing exactly on the animals, but into what's going on in the minds of the people who work there. And another thing that's really fascinating is that the results of this film. McDonald's and Tyson terminated their contracts with this facility after the footage came out, if I'm correct. And what happened here that in this undercover footage that made them make that decision?
Well, the footage that came out of this investigation was absolutely horrific. I mean, in one moment that he caught on film, one of the owners of the farms is literally beating chickens to death with a spiked club. In another moment, they're stepping on the chickens. It looks like they're stepping on their heads and their necks and pulling their wings to break the necks of the chickens. I mean, the abuse was so disturbing that, yes, the contracts were canceled. The owners of the farm both pled guilty to animal cruelty charges, and then the farm actually shut down. So this place is no longer in business because of this investigation, which is the best outcome I could ever think of.
Yeah, well, not the best outcome. The best outcome is for everybody to stop eating chickens.
Well, true.
Second best outcome.
True.
And really an amazing outcome. But, do you find it really frustrating to understand that what went on here probably goes on at a lot of places where undercover operators just don't happen to be taking film? And how does it... As director of communications, how do you convey that when you see this egregious cruelty, you want something done about it, you want this to shut them down, to make an example of them, but at the same time you want people to understand this isn't odd, this isn't that aberrational?
Yeah, well, I think, at this point, Mercy for Animals has done over 50 undercover investigations in the United States and Canada. And every single time we send in an undercover investigator, we uncover horrific animal abuse that shocks people. So yes, this abuse does run rampant throughout the industry. And what's interesting is that a lot of the abuse that people find so disturbing are actually standard practices on factory farms. So things like mutilating animals without painkillers, grinding up male chicks or suffocating them to death in the egg industry, thumping, which is a practice that happens in the pork industry where baby piglets are, slammed against the ground head first. All these are considered standard industry practices. So the abuse is just, it's rampant. It's rampant in the industry. But with regards to communicating this to the public, we release these investigations, but then we also use this footage in other ways. We write blogs using this footage. We create GIFs using this footage. We create videos that come out of these investigations that aren't just the investigation release. But for example, we made a video called What Cody Saw, which really follows one of our previous undercover investigators, not when he's going in, but now in the aftermath of doing all of that, how his life has changed for him and his family, for example. So that we use this footage in a number of ways. And of course, I think as animal activists, this footage is one of the most powerful tools we have, not just for changing hearts and minds, but also for getting companies to really, really implement meaningful animal welfare reforms, and also to get laws changed, using this film as leverage when things like, for example, Question 3 in Massachusetts that people will be voting on in a couple weeks, getting those laws passed and getting lawmakers to take this issue seriously.
Yeah, certainly it's important in that realm, but it's also obviously really important in just getting the word out to people. And you've mentioned that you've done so many of these investigations now, and they come out all the time, really. I mean, not just for Mercy for Animals, though Mercy for Animals is certainly one of the leaders here. And I just want to give a shout out to Cody Carlson, who was the star of that movie and was my former student at Brooklyn Law School. Just want to mention that. I get credit for everything Cody does. That's but anyway. So there have been so many of these undercover operations, and so many people have talked about them, and they used to get press really a lot. And I feel, correct me if I'm wrong, that it's probably harder to get press now because it's just one after another, and they're showing, as you pointed out, the same horrific abuses because this goes on everywhere. How have the challenges changed in getting press for these kinds of undercover investigations? And how do you deal with that as a director of communications?
Well, so much has changed in the media, especially in the last 10 or 15 years. I mean, if you did something like this 10 or 15 years ago, there were just a handful of major networks that, might or might not cover it. I mean, you're looking at mostly getting, I guess, local news at that point, hopefully coverage in some newspapers. And of course, then to get people in general to watch the video, you'd have to hand someone a DVD, and then they'd have to put it in their DVD player, and then they'd have to hand it off, and you'd have to print, I don't know, thousands of them. And but nowadays, things have changed so much. There's definitely traditional routes, with regards to media, with local news, national news, newspapers. But then, of course, we have places like Vice, we have places like Huffington Post, we have places like BuzzFeed, we have places like Upworthy that are more web-based media, but that get millions and millions of hits a day. So we still go those traditional routes, but we also try to utilize all these newer forms of media. And then, of course, just being able to release this footage ourselves. Right now, Mercy for Animals, just on the US Facebook page alone, has over 2 million followers. And for example, we released an investigation just this weekend. This was an investigation we did on a turkey factory farm in Canada. The investigation was so shocking that actually Canada's #1 news program, it's called W5, it's similar to our 60 Minutes here in the United States. They did a 20-minute segment on it. But then when we released the investigation on our Facebook page on Monday, it went like wildfire. It already has over 300,000 views on Facebook and thousands of shares, thousands of comments. So I think that we've just broadened the way that we can get this information out there and broadened who can actually cover this.
Do you think that given this, that most people now actually know, sort of, at least kind of, the basic outlines of what's going on factory farms as opposed to, say, 5 years ago?
I think a lot more people know. I don't think I would say most. I think there's, sadly, a lot of willful ignorance. And I also know that the meat, dairy, and egg industry spend millions and millions of dollars portraying their product in a way that's just, quite frankly, deceitful, showing people images of hens running on hills and cows in open pastures. And I think that, there might be a tendency for people who consume those products to want to believe that. Of course, the reality is much different. But I think that things are rapidly changing, and I credit social media to a lot of that. I think the fact that we can release, like I said, an undercover video, and within an amount of minutes, hours, thousands, millions of people watch it, it's getting harder and harder to avoid the truth.
I think that you're right, and I sense that people... I usually take my students as an example, who are, students. They're very bright. They decided to take an animal law course, so they're interested in animals. And they know more than my students did, say, 5 years ago about what's going on with factory farming. And most of them come in saying that's one of their concerns. And yet, when we actually study it and we actually show the videos, they're deeply shocked. It's like people have a superficial knowledge that there's something wrong, but they don't. There's a lot of denial and a lot of resistance, and they don't really know the details. So how, as a communications director, do you get past that and get people to watch or to know or to pay attention? You mentioned one of the ways was this film we started off talking about. Make it about people, and people will watch that. What other tricks do you have up your sleeve for the future of communications in this movement? How do we reach people?
Okay, I'm going to give you my whole communication strategy.
Excellent.
I think making it about people is really important. I think that's really powerful. I know, for example, I don't know if you saw Speciesism, the movie, but I think one of the things that Mark DeVries, he was the director, did so brilliantly in that film was interview people in communities where factory farms exist, and hearing from those people what their lives are like now that a factory farm has moved in next door. I think that was extremely effective. So concentrating on people and what their experience is, either in seeing the abuse or of them, their lives being affected in some ways by this industry, but also making it about the animals. When we're talking about billions of animals, I think sometimes that's absolutely impossible for us to comprehend, and it really is. But when you make it about one animal, for example, a cow that escapes a slaughterhouse, people just, I mean, and you know these people eat meat, but I feel like every so often a story will come out about an animal who escapes a slaughterhouse and is running around a city or whatever. People just go crazy over these stories. They want the animal to be rescued. They don't want the animal to be slaughtered, even though there are billions of others just like this animal who are being slaughtered at the same time. So I think making it about an animal and telling an animal story is really important. And then, of course, there's all sorts of ways that we present this information at MFA via our communication strategy. We write many blog posts that frame the information in all different ways. We do some clickbaity stuff, which is always a good way to get people to just get eyes on the information. We try and tie stuff back to what's going on in pop culture, what's going on with regards to the time of year. So there's many ways that we can present this information. And as we progress, I mean, now we're seeing people use new technologies like 360 photos, for example, or virtual reality is, I think, really the next step in getting people to experience, what's happening on factory farms. So I think that it's evolving, and we just have to keep our finger on the pulse of all of that and really utilize whatever tools are out there to present this information.
Yeah, and I think that everybody, Mercy for Animals is doing an amazing job at that largely because of you and the other great people who work there. And so can everybody who's listening to this think constantly about, and I'm sure everybody who listens to this is just thinking constantly about how best to communicate this information. But it just never really seems to get easy, I'll have to tell you, or it sure hasn't anywhere, yet. Mercy for Animals, and as with so many animal rights organizations, Mercy for Animals has evolved in many ways into a communications organization. We had all hoped that legislation and litigation were going to lead somewhere, but it really has been just getting these undercover investigations out there, getting the information out there, and then negotiating with corporations that has led to the great changes that we have seen so far, which hopefully will lead to more changes. And and Mercy for Animals has been at the forefront of that, and it's repeatedly selected by animal charity evaluators as a top charity, and as a result is garnering much more funding than it has in the past. And why do you believe specifically that what MFA is doing is effective in a way that perhaps some other organizations are not? I'm not asking you to put anybody down, because there's a role for everybody. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but brag a little about what is it that MFA is doing that really works?
Well, first of all, I think what MFA is still most well known for is our undercover work. And I think the undercover work speaks for itself. The work of these brave undercover investigators is just incredible. And the images that we're able to show people because of this work is invaluable. I mean, all I can say is that I have an incredible creative team in the communications department at MFA. I really couldn't do this, without them. And we are constantly brainstorming and coming up with new ways to present information. And really some of it is like just packaging and repackaging, because the message is always the same. Stop this cruelty, everyone go vegan. I mean, that's at the core of it. But then of course, yes, like you said, using this footage and using this information to push companies to really move the ball forward for animals in terms of their animal welfare standards. But I have to say, I think that a lot of it is also because of the time that we live in. Just to give people listening a little bit of hope, just to put things into perspective, in the baby boomer generation, 1% consider themselves committed vegetarians. Gen X, it's about 4%, but millennials, it's 12%. 12% of millennials consider themselves committed vegetarians. And what the most recent studies show is that a lot of this is because of things like Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And it's because people are a lot more, they're living their lives, for better or for worse, on social media, and you can't avoid this content. It's just so prevalent. And a lot of the animal rights groups or animal welfare groups have an enormous presence on social media. Like I said, Mercy for Animals, we now have over 2 million followers on Facebook. I think PETA has over 4 million followers on Facebook. So this information is getting out in a huge, huge way.
Another thing that's come up recently is this, speaking of undercover investigations, is this undercover investigation by Direct Action Everywhere into a cage-free facility that got really good